Hello everyone and welcome to this video. I've got some good news. I've done a PCV or a PSV test to drive a bus or coach, and I passed my test, and I'm really happy that I did pass it. But I thought I'd do a little video just to talk about the test. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this video for you, which will talk about the test, and I'll give you my advice and thoughts on it.
Already there? How's your nerves? Okay this morning?
Nervous, yeah. Good afternoon.
It's test day. Sophie has been working hard all week with her trainer Chris, preparing for today's practical test in Ipswich.
We've been driving around town, so covered all the difficult spots. Coming to a stop by a curve sort of thing is always making sure that you are in a straight line, because that's what the examiners look for, and doing all the right manoeuvres. I've already got my Class 2 and my Class 1 licence. I've been driving lorries, and for me doing my PCV licence will give me that contact with the public that I really like. I feel confident in my ability to drive, so it should be okay. Here we go, we're at the test centre. I'm about to take my test. I'm confident but very, very nervous.
In the waiting room, we sign up, ask for the candidate's details, licence, we do a licence check, we do a theory test check. If the candidate so wishes, they can have their trainer accompany them for the full test, but it's down to the candidate if they wish that to happen. See you later. Bye. We go out to the Virtual, we take details of the Virtual, i.e. the registration, and then we do 5 tell me, show me, and 3 Virtual safety checks. Right, so I've got some safety questions to ask you now. Can you identify where you check the engine oil level?
Yes. It's actually computerised here.
Okay, fine. Now, can you show me how you check the horn is working?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. From there, we explain to them that we're going to carry out a reverse exercise, showing them the board, what they must do. At present, we're here. When I ask you, I want you to drive forward and stop so the extreme front of your vehicle is level with, and in between the 2 cones shown here is NA1. What we're looking for there is good control and also all-round observation. We'd allow them to get out once. What we'd like them to do is obviously assess their position from the driving seat, and just to get out, just to give them an idea if they can go back further, or if they are actually in the bay, that's fine.
The next manoeuvre is the braking exercise. Sophie must reach 20 miles per hour and stop at the 2 cones.
What we're looking for there is that they stop under control, don't skid and so forth, and stop as quickly as they can. Thanks, Sophie. That's the end of the on-site exercises. We're off out the road now. We'll be out for approximately an hour. That's an hour's drive on road. And the next roundabout, turn right, please, Sophie. That's the second exit. What we're watching for there is that they approach, take all the observations first, obviously with the mirrors before they start slowing down, into that roundabout safely. So in other words, there's no traffic on the roundabout that they're going to impede. Roundabouts are designed to keep traffic flows moving, and if they can do so, then they'll keep going. Now Sophie, could you pull up at the next bus stop on the left, in a position so that passengers can get on and off safely, please? So we'll do several normal stops. We'll also do several bus stops, where we're looking at them pulling up at a bus stop so that passengers can get on and off safely. Thank you, and drive on when you're ready. We also do what we call an angle start, where we ask the candidate to pull up behind a stationary vehicle, leaving enough space for them to move away. And what we're watching again for there is the take all round observation, because we'll select a road which is reasonably narrow so that they've got to take into account traffic coming towards as well as traffic coming from behind.
After an hour on the road, Sophie returns to the test centre.
Well, I've made a mistake under reversing. I touched one of the cones, so
And
doesn't sound too good.
What about your drive? How did you get on?
I think it went all right.
Okay, Sophie, that is the end of the test. I'm sorry you've not been successful.
Yeah,
Would you like me to explain why?
go on, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the test, she got herself a little bit close to the cone, realised that she had to take a shunt, but unfortunately she put far too much steering on, and with the rear end sweep it knocked the cone over, unfortunately. Apart from the reverse, there was only 4 driving faults.
No.
Yeah.
With one serious fault on the sheet, that clearly is a serious fault and it's a fail. Without the serious fault, that would have been a good pass. Candidates do get the opportunity to stop if they wish, but I'd encourage people to carry on, because there's an hour out on the road. There could be elements within that drive that they need to know if there are any problems that they need to brush up on next time they come for a driving test. So continue with the drive. Okay, Sophie, I'd like to talk to you now about eco-safe driving. There's a couple of occasions on the test where you could have block changed up and down, which resulted in using what you actually do was change through the gears sequential.
Okay.
And if you'd have block changed, it'd just say unnecessary gear changes. Also, there was a couple of junctions, roundabouts in fact, that you came to, that if you'd have planned it better, you could have fitted into the traffic without having to stop.
Yeah.
All that's actually explained in here.
Okay.
If you'd like to take that away with you
Yes.
and read it, and obviously give you a little bit more information.
Okay.
Candidates get stressed on the day of the test, but if they've had the training which takes them above what is required for the PCV test, they'll feel confident to go through, and even if they make mistakes, they'll still pass.
It's really, really hard to take that I failed on that little bit, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to do it.
Right guys, as you can see in that video, basically the lady actually failed on the reverse. The reverse is probably the easiest part of the actual test, to be honest with you. It seemed to me she wasn't looking in her mirrors and she basically swung the back end, and that's what happens with coaches and buses, unfortunately. You have to watch that tail swing, and she didn't watch it and it hit the cone. Just imagine if that was a pedestrian and you knocked them over. I don't think they'd be too pleased, so that's why she got the fail. I do think it's a bit harsh. Perhaps doing 2 tests, maybe splitting the reverse and the main driving would probably help a little bit, I think, just like they've done with the multiple choice and the hazard perception. Anyway, let's talk about how you go about getting a PCV license. First thing you need to do is basically get 85% of the multiple choice, which is basically general, questions around the highway code, really. And then you have the hazard perception test, which is a video and you're just looking out for hazards. Then you're expected to pass a CPC Module 2, which is case studies, and you need to get a pass mark of 40 out of 50. Going back to the hazard perception, it's 67%, I think out of 100 pass mark, something like that. Obviously I've said CPC case studies Module 2 you need to pass, and you'll also need to pass CPC Module 4, which basically is a show and tell, and basically you just go through possible defects that could happen on your vehicle and how you would check your vehicle, and any other checks you might do, such as checking for illegal immigrants, drugs, contraband, explosives, inside and outside. Any advice I would give to anyone who basically decide to do a PCV test is basically do your research, do your homework. When you're out on the road, just remember not to oversteer. The thing is, what people don't realise is driving a bus is really hard, because in a car you just turn when you come to a turn, don't you, with your steering wheel. But on a bus or a coach, you have to allow the vehicle to go forward, possibly around 2 meters before you turn. The reason for that is if you don't, your back wheels will mount the curb, because basically you're dragging the back round, because obviously the back wheels don't turn. So when people think driving a bus or a coach is easy, it's not. It's very hard. The hardest part I found about learning to drive a bus or coach was adapting my steering style to how different it is in terms of driving a car. So you've got to be mindful of the steering differences. Obviously the length of the vehicle is another thing, and obviously it's a lot wider. It tends to be about 8.2 meters wide, something like that. So it is a lot wider than a typical car is. So you need to be mindful of that. The biggest thing I would suggest to anyone learning to drive would be to check your mirrors all the time. Now, funny enough, I was told off by my instructor that I was looking in the mirrors too much. I only did that really to just cover myself, to make sure I was looking in mirrors, because when I did my car license, I was always told I didn't look in my mirrors enough. So, in terms of learning to drive, try and pick a testing centre that's not in the middle of a town centre or a city centre, because driving in town centres and city centres on your test is a big ask. I only just passed because of that, and in fact I think it was not far off rush hour when I finally did my test. So obviously there was a lot of traffic to contend with, a lot of pedestrians to contend with, a lot of street furniture to be mindful of. In terms of driving generally, what you need to do is plan well ahead. That goes double for traffic lights. If you see a traffic light on green, be prepared to slow down and stop, because it takes a lot longer to stop the vehicle, and obviously you need to be mindful of your passengers on board as well. You don't want to be braking harshly, because they might be stood up and they might go flying through the windscreen at some point. So be mindful of that. In terms of approaching parked cars on your left, I found that was difficult. Not so the actual overtaking, but it was moving over. Sometimes other drivers weren't very cooperative in terms of letting you out. Sometimes it could be 20 cars before someone would actually have some common sense. I even saw a learner driving instructor, not be courteous, and you would have thought someone qualified to drive and teach people would be courteous to oncoming learning drivers, especially in a PCV coach, vehicle or bus. Don't give up, guys, if you do fail. I think the biggest thing to think about is when you think about learning and you choose a school to teach you, is try and get yourself an instructor who you feel comfortable with. Not someone who's overbearing, not someone who's a bit like a sergeant major who'll shout at you. You want someone who you can take feedback constructively from them without feeling that you're a terrible person. So, choose your instructor carefully, because a good instructor is the best thing you can have when being taught how to drive a coach or bus. It basically makes the difference between you passing and failing, and that's not to underestimate the fact that there's so much going off when you're thinking about pedestrians all around you, vehicles all around you, cars and vehicles all around you, street furniture all around you, especially when you're turning, roundabouts not having enough room. Sometimes you may block other people off because you're so large, and you're having to check your mirrors all the time. So it's all about planning well ahead. And one thing I would recommend is you look into the Smith's system, which basically the concept is instead of looking down or eye level, you look a little bit above. So you're seeing ahead, seeing what's coming, and you give yourself time. So by the time the vehicle is a lot closer, you've got more time basically because you've already seen it, you've already noticed it, and you plan well ahead. In terms of other road users, they will frustrate you because they will simply not care about you, and they will cut in, they will make you angry, they will do lots of stupid things. But because you're supposed to be a professional driver, you need to rise above that and try not show any sort of aggression in the way you drive, as well as the things you might say to yourself while driving, because we all talk to ourselves sometimes, and there will be occasions when someone cuts you up and you want to say something, but you have to be mindful that you've got customers inside the vehicle as well, and they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear any bad language as well. They just want a pleasant journey. So, when you are out there on the road, guys, please, be as courteous as you can to other road users. There always is a fine line between being courteous and being too defensive. So, when you are moving out, when a vehicle's blocking your path, do it slowly and give yourself plenty of time. And if it is tight on either side, just slow down to a crawl, 1, 2, 3 miles an hour, and just keep checking your mirrors, left and right, making sure you've got enough room. If you're a van driver, you might have an advantage doing that because you're used to being in tight spaces delivering your parcels. I personally found being a delivery driver in the past did help me to become accustomed to the size of the vehicle, because obviously I used to drive a long wheelbase van, and obviously it's a lot smaller than a bus and a coach. However, it gives you more spatial awareness than someone who only driven cars basically. Other hazards you're going to experience are pedestrians and street furniture, and what I mean by that is railings, lights, light posts, street lighting, basically anything that they put on the side basically of the road. And you need to be mindful of these things and approach your turnings, and give yourself plenty of room. In terms of how much you could expect to pay out, well, you're probably talking around £30 to £40 for your hazard perception and your multiple choice. Then you've got your CPC Module 2 and your CPC Module 4. Now, if you're passing your test at present, your CPC Module 3 and your CPC Module 1 is incorporated into your theory and your practical test. If you've passed a PSV or a PCV test some years ago, you may have to do extra work regarding your CPC. If you don't know what a CPC is, it's just basically a professional competence qualification that tells employers that you know how to look after your vehicle, you know how to do your checks to make sure it's fully operational, fully working, and there's no issues with your vehicle. So if you get pulled over by VORSA, they're not going to find any defects, not going to find anything wrong with your vehicle. Your company won't get a fine, you won't get a fine, you won't get any points on your license because you've done your job correctly. Generally, if they see that you've done your checks but it's not being fixed, and it's down to the engineer then, if they've not done their job, they're the ones that get into trouble. They don't expect you to be mechanics, VORSA, but you need to basically do a lot of checks on your vehicle to make sure that it is roadworthy and that it won't put anyone's life in danger, including your own. In terms of the cost of the actual training and your driving test, you're probably talking around between £1,200 and £2,000, depending on how quickly you learn. I passed on my first attempt, but that was because I had a good trainer, and I think I only just scraped through because I was going through a city centre. If you're gonna do your test, I would probably advise you to try and pick a testing centre that's outside of town. So in general, hopefully you won't be driving right through the middle of the town centre. But just keep your wits and learn everything you can from the instructor, because he's the one that will make you basically pass. And I can't commend my instructor. Enough, basically, because he was basically the best instructor I've ever had. And this is coming from someone who was very nervous because I'd actually not passed my car driving licence and failed it 4 times. I personally believe that's probably down to the instructor not teaching me properly. But that was always in my mind, and obviously I was a bit cautious. I basically had a brilliant reversing manoeuvre. I've always done it brilliantly. But if you're confident in one area, you'll always find something you're not so good in another. I think the biggest thing of all regarding driving a PCV vehicle is your planning, basically. So when you're coming up to a pedestrian crossing, you need to be ready to stop well in advance. So if anyone crossing, you're aware of them about to cross. When you're entering a junction and you want to turn right and there's a vehicle already in the middle part turning and say the lights are about to change, you don't go any further. You actually stop at the line and you don't enter the area for turning, because obviously there's not enough room or time for you to move. The biggest thing for me was turning, really, because basically your wheels tend to be behind you, and because of that, it takes a lot of time to learn how to turn the vehicle, because you have a tendency to oversteer, basically. So what you'll find when you oversteer a bus or coach is the back wheels get dragged around, and they do tend to either clip the curb or go over the curb. Basically that's a serious fault if you go over the curb. So what you need to be doing is watching your mirrors at all times and watch that backswing of the rear of the vehicle. In some vehicles it's worse, some vehicles it's quite mild. It depends how long your vehicle is. But be mindful of these things when you're driving a vehicle like this. Get used to the dimensions of the vehicle as well as the height. That's another thing you need to be careful of, because obviously if you're driving a bus, double-decker bridges, be careful, because you won't be driving for long if you hit a bridge. So I hope this video has been helpful, giving you a heads up on what you need to watch out for. Any questions about the test, let me know. I'll give you a basic rundown, Obviously I can't mention the company that I obviously did it with, for obvious social media reasons. However, you know, I'm more than happy to give you any advice or point you in the right direction of what you need to do, perhaps if you did fail. And thank you for watching.